I remember the song, I've known it for so long, and it feels so good to hear.
Looks can be oh so wonderfully deceiving. You look at the cover of Rhapsody and think, yep, this sure was made in the late 90s. But then you look at some gameplay and start thinking something along the lines of, oh, this looks like a super cutesy, obscure anime RPG about collecting little guys and going on a wholesome adventure. And you'd be right. By like a third, which is less than 50%. So mathematically, you are wrong, you're failing, and everything you know is a lie. I mean, that's what I thought when I saw this cover, but as I went on, what I got was a strangely thoughtful story about different forms of love and the tragedies that can surround them. A kid's game that wasn't necessarily for little kids, but one about learning to grow up. A story that features the innocence of young love and the grim consequences of one's actions in equal measure. A game where I can command 3 living eggs to kill a god. It's a pretty good time, I tell you what. Despite the game's relative obscurity in the West, and by game I mean series, Rhapsody proved to be surprisingly successful in Japan, where it received 2 full-on sequels plus a handful of spin-offs and ended up being NIS's earliest franchise success. Before Rhapsody, they were just a small developer making puzzle and mahjong games, but this little title changed their whole course. Nowadays, the company is known for series like Disgaea, Phantom Brave, Yomawari, Labyrinth of Refrain, the list goes on and on. If you're a fan of tactics games, you're more than familiar with their work, and Rhapsody, also known as the Marl Kingdom series, is canonical within most of those worlds. It's kind of like the little acorn that went on to sprout a very grindy tree. It's a game from humble origins with far more to offer than you'd think at first glance. And thanks to the Prinny Presents line bundling their old games together, you don't need to spend over $300 to legally play it. You even get it paired with the definitive edition of La Pucelle Ragna. Oh my. This could only have more contrast if it was painted in black and white. If you were to judge this by whatever, quote, objective, unquote, criteria you have for JRPGs, it wouldn't do very well. It only takes about 10 to 12 hours to finish, the combat is blissfully easy, there aren't any fancy systems at play, and there's only one oversized sword, and even that's dubious. But all of the design elements that make Rhapsody stand apart from its contemporaries are what make it such a fascinating game in retrospect. A title that went deliberately against the grain with an ethos not shared by other JRPGs of the time, or even today. It's far from typical, doubtless part of the reason it didn't make a splash outside of Japan. Well, that and the fact Atlas published it in the States, their name wasn't always golden. Was that a pun? I'm gonna say it's a pun. Rhapsody functions on a different axis with clear purpose, and that purpose is echoed throughout every aspect of the game. If you're seeking conventional, turn away now, for you shall not find it here. However, if you seek heart, love, something one of a kind, and maybe a catchy song, allow me to tell you about Rhapsody, a musical adventure. Our story begins like all good stories do. The protagonist staring death in the face, but just before she's killed, a gallant young man arrives to save the day. Swept away by his heroic deed and dashing good looks, the young girl goes in for a kiss, only to find it's all a dream. This is Cornette, 16 years old, 5 feet tall, Libra, one heck of a trumpet player. In her tiny little countryside settlement of Orange Village, she lives with her grandfather while dreaming of finding her Prince Charming. For now though, she's just running some errands alongside her magical fairy companion, Kururu. If you walk around the village and talk to everyone, you actually get some much needed backstory for Cornette. By just taking some time to talk to the villagers, we can gather that her parents passed away some time ago, with her father specifically having died during a war 16 years ago. It's also made clear Cornette's ability to understand and befriend these little doodads known as puppets is unique to her. So it's clear she has some greater significance in the world. Talking to everyone for this info also doubles to give Orange Village a real small countryside cozy feel to it, where it seems like everybody knows everybody's name. The kind of town where there's one schoolhouse and all the kids just learn different grade levels in the same room. Those puppets I mentioned do hold a special significance in the world of Marl Kingdom though, so I want to focus on them for a bit. Puppets are everywhere in the game, and talking to them gives you a bit of insight about the person who owns them. It makes me think of the yokai known as a Skumogami, where an object gains gains a soul after being treated well for long enough. Granted, the puppets in this world seem to be crafted with a sort of soul or consciousness from their creation, which they say will ascend to heaven once they achieve true happiness. When I heard that, it really stuck in my mind. Personally, I've always imagined inanimate objects possessing some kind of experience of their own, although not quite on the level of straight up sentience. When I see tattered books in a used media store, I can't help but wonder what kind of life they lived to reach that point. Did their owners make it to the final page? Did the experience of reading them make the owner happy? How many people did it reach before ending up in this store for another to potentially make it part of their life? If these books could talk, would they say they're fulfilled? For that matter, do the games I play and collect feel appreciated? Or are they resentful of me because I'm so slow at playing through them for these videos? I'm so sorry, Wild Arms. You will have your day. Or months, really, let's be honest. Some might say it's silly to humanize everyday objects, but I can't help myself. They exist, they're here, they've seen things. Depending on what they are, they've seen very specific things. The puppets just intrigue me as an aspect of world building I find personally relatable, and seeing as they get reincarnated after reaching heaven, which is a bit of a contradiction, but let's ignore that, it strikes with nods towards Buddhism that's only reinforced as you accomplish side quests for your own puppets. Or maybe it's as simple as when you're a little kid and you call your teddy bear a friend. But while the puppets are interesting and a vital part of actual gameplay, the plot doesn't concern them very much. No, instead it's about Cornet's dream crush, who turns out to be a real person she meets just like in her dream. After encountering Meow? That's really her name? Alright. Anyway, she's one of several witches you meet over the course of the game, and when she summons her dragon to deal with Cornet, who should arrive but a prince in the spitting image of the man from Cornet's dream. This is Prince Ferdinand, and this meeting sparks what will be the central focus of the game's narrative. Rhapsody, being a musical adventure inspired by classic Disney films, is a simple love story at its core. Simple country girl Cornet meets the prince of her dreams, they're both smitten for one another, and this love drives Cornet after her beloved is kidnapped by the evil witch Marjorie. But not before she has to win his heart in a beauty contest that involves actual brutal combat. Man, why don't more beauty pageants have this? Come on, let's get the contestants for the next Miss America in the octagon. The relationship between Cornet and Ferdinand isn't explored very much, seeing as they only have a few scenes together before Marjorie turns him rock hard in the worst possible way, but I don't think it's meant to be. Rhapsody is a game about love in many different forms, and the different facets of that emotion from different perspectives. Cornet and Ferdinand share a simple attraction for one another that proves to be true despite what little time they share together. It's cute, it works, but it's little more than simple motivation to travel the world and see emotions from different perspectives. Rhapsody loves love, and unlike many other JRPGs that tease the concept of romance while only going for surface level exploration, Rhapsody takes its time to show and explore it in many different forms. Some of them aren't even romantic, but still represent this powerful emotion we all share. During the pageant, there's a heavy focus on Cornet's stuck-up rival, Etoile. How stuck up is she? Well, she unironically does the Ojo-sama laugh. Cornet walks in on an argument she has with her father, a man who sadly hasn't been the most attentive parent. He and his wife had Etoile when their business was gaining traction, and they used the money they earned and place a real affection for their daughter, causing her to become so resentful and petty. She isn't even in the pageant because she likes the prince. She's doing it because it'd be good for her parents' social standing if she married into royalty. But through Cornet's intervention, the pair realize the errors in both their ways and get on track to resolve their issues. Doesn't stop Etoile from being rude to you, but at least she's kind of an ally now. Kind of sad how she's pretty much Cornet's only friend. Then there's the dog Koro, whom you learn about early in the game by talking to villagers. If you revisit them a ways into the game, you'll learn he died saving his human from drowning. Fortunately, you can recruit his spirit as a puppet and save the boy's life again through finding a special medicinal herb. Even in death, Koro just wants to help his best friend. Would you do that for me, Bill? Oh, that's okay, you're still a good dog. However, not every story has a happy ending. You'd think a game ostensibly meant for young children wouldn't portray more tragic character endings, but Rhapsody doesn't shy away from them, especially in the latter half of the game. The actual structure of the plot sees Cornet hunting down 5 special crystals representing the elements in an effort to save Ferdinand. Gee, an epic RPG about collecting treasures representing— wait, That's not my running gag. Because each stone is in a different corner of the kingdom, it gives the plot a predictable but distinct short story feel. It means each little adventure you have gives each location some time to shine. One of my favorites is visiting the sunken ship to find the water stone. Cornet gets caught up in a feud between the captain and a pirate named Takroff over the incidental death of the captain's son and Takroff's best friend Libany. They're constantly at each other's throats and grieving in their own way, blaming each other for Libany's death during a storm. So when Libany's spirit shows up, he tells them they're both being dumb. He had fun with his life, and while he wishes he could have kept going, there was nothing anyone could do. His life is over, but the living need to go on for both of their sakes. You even go back and return the ring he got for his fiancée, completing a tragic trio of grieving survivors connected by their love for one person. Then they take it a step further with the Kero Kingdom, where you find the Earthstone. The princess Caroline is in love with a commoner named Michael. However, because of her strict father, Michael is threatened with death unless he retrieves the Earthstone from the nearby guardian frog centaur thing. Alright, so we go down there and retrieve it, because we need it anyway, and it'd be nice to help out the troubled couple. But when Michael gives the sign of his courage to the king, earned off the back of some random teenage girl's toys, but whatever, the king acknowledges the man's deed. Moments before, he has Michael executed right in front of Caroline. They didn't do anything wrong, but because of the strict views of the king, it still ends in tragedy. And it's kind of your fault because you're the one who helped him get the Earthstone in the first place. And if you didn't piece it together from the star-crossed lovers setup, how they're somewhat of a Romeo and Juliet reference, it gets even worse. If you know to look at the Ice Temple, you'll find a shared grave for the couple, Caroline having followed her beloved to the afterlife. There's a surprising amount of death in this game. Cornet's parents died early in her life, the souls of puppets seem to at least sometimes be linked to the souls of the dead, the Thunderstone quest involves the potential death of an entire animal species vital to the village of White Snow, you have to kill a pair of dragons watching over the volcano, and your actions in doing so result in the death of some villagers of Red Hot. Koro died, Michael and Caroline are dead, Cornet's visit inside Kururu's dream shows her the death of her own mother. It's a shockingly grim series of events. Also, apparently the resource known as Enotium, which is used as both fuel and currency, restored life to the world after everybody on the planet was killed. It never comes up again, so I don't know why they brought it up, but I mean, that sounds brutal. Talk about fossil fuels. I've just been stockpiling my winnings because I don't need to buy items, and you're telling me my nest egg can literally spawn life? Bonkers. Despite that context, the dialogue, story, and world building is otherwise incredibly lighthearted, which feels like a strange contrast, but I think it works. Rhapsody is a pastiche to Disney films on the surface level, but it also blends it with elements of classic fairy tales. And by classic, I mean the really old ones that were meant to scare children into behaving, like the kind that would say you'll have your fingers cut off by a fish gremlin if you don't eat your cabbage or something. Death is just part of life and love, even in a place that seems as cheery and goofy as Marl Kingdom, a place where a dragon caws like a crow, a witch commands a silly trio of kittens, and talking frogs put on a musical number for you. It's a soft, fluffy place of dreams and whimsy, punctuated by shocking punches of high emotion. But what's the big deal? JRPG stories have death in them all the time. What makes this one so special? Well, I think these moments stand out so much in Rhapsody because the context, the dialogue, the aesthetic, the driving ethos of design for this game feels distinctly feminine. Yes, I know it's Pride Month, hopefully, so cis heteronormativity, boo. Attributing certain behaviors or aesthetics to one end of the gender spectrum is arbitrary and silly and reinforces stereotypes, but I think there's at least some reason as to why, in the grand scope of things, people who identify closer to male or female have an affinity for certain characteristics. You know, on the macro level, most guys would rather watch John Wick than Mamma Mia, while women would rather also watch John Wick. Hey, Keanu's hot. We see things as masculine or feminine coded in society all the time, especially media, and a large portion of said media is often designed to appeal to a specific demographic, with the biggest distinction often being male or female, even though individuals are totally different within and without those demographics. And while men can enjoy baking shows and women can enjoy professional wrestling, and every other gender's being excluded from that arbitrary marketing division, there is usually some kind of basis for why things are male or female coded, whether that's because of inherent and psychological reasons or because it's just how society has constantly informed generations to act. I leave that discussion to those more researched than I. But anyway, think back to the JRPGs of the era, or even now. On the PS1 alone, you have Legend of Dragoon, Wild Arms, Thousand Arms, Suikoden, Final Fantasy VII. They're all very masculine coded. They're about powerful characters, often male, stopping overwhelming forces of evil on a massive scale, leading like-minded allies and gaining power through battle. Heck, Cloud's Buster Sword is one of, if not the most iconic weapon in the genre, and what's manlier than a giant sword? Except maybe a giant sword with a beard. It isn't just the weapons, it's often the setting. You think of Final Fantasy VII, you think of the massive industrial city of Midgar. Cold, stark, oppressive. This genre, these stories, these characters and settings can be enjoyed by anyone regardless of gender, but it's hard to deny in a society dominated by gender division, these games tend to be very masculine coded. So it's fascinating to see Nipponichi make a distinctly feminine coded game as their first RPG, and most of the people who made it were still guys. How about that? Every aspect of this game's design feels soft, cute, fluffy, sparkly, lovely, and just all that good stuff. Even going back to the story, the heavy focus on exploring a specific emotion from different perspectives is strikingly different to how other games treat love. Even in a game like Grandia, which is fantastic by the way, the romance between Justin and Fina is more a consequence of the central adventure story. It adds to the characterization of the protagonist, but in a way that's purely positive and straightforward. It's cute and good in its own right, but there's something about the way Rhapsody tackles separate facets of the emotion. The story being so small scale means it's more about the connections between those Cornet meets on her journey, rather than just branching off from a pursuit of an overarching evil. Kind of like most Atelier games, come to think about it. Neither way is better or worse, because those are entirely subjective, just different approaches focusing on different things to experience. Rhapsody's story isn't epic, it's just an extended rescue mission lasting about 10 to 12 hours, but the cozy atmosphere of Marl and the short exchanges forming all the heartfelt stories make it endearing in a way that's different to most JRPGs, especially of its era. Remember, when Rhapsody was hitting shelves, it was surrounded by games like Xenogears, Brave Fencer Musashi, Suikoden 2, Star Ocean Second Story. So a game about a spunky teenage girl rescuing her dreamy boyfriend in a fluffy rural fantasy? Yeah, I can see why it didn't make waves outside of Japan in the edgy, hyper-extreme, grungy landscape of the late 90s. So many awful, awful fonts. Also, just look at this game. It's adorable. The environments are colorful and full of detail, the character designs are generally pretty cute, almost like something I'd see in Chow or Ribbon, and animations are comedic and charming. Walking around the Marl Kingdom doesn't take too long, seeing as the developers didn't have a massive budget. The more things change, am I right? So there sadly aren't too many unique locations to see, and the dungeons are just really repetitive tiles, which got on my nerves after a while, I won't lie. I guess the Marl Kingdom isn't a tourist country. It's nice to know NIS were so expressive with their characters even all the way back in 1998. Although some of these character designs have me seriously questioning the target demographic of this game. It's all soft and fluffy, so you'd think it'd be for young girls, but here's Marjorie showing pixel jiggle physics. Someone had to animate that. They probably thought that was a great day at work. I wonder if they worked on La Pucelle too. And it still has their very particular sense of humor. Now there's nothing as absurd as the dreaded horse wiener, but you do have things like the classic paper fan gag, Cornet's outfit for the contest, and this great joke about direct translation in the Snow Village. I really liked that. All very silly, all very lighthearted. Not enough to make me forget about the tragedies I've witnessed, but I did get a chuckle out of Rhapsody every now and then. But really, this whole game's aesthetic feels like they were adapting a kid's storybook, or at least a kid's manga. And if anything cements that, it's the musical numbers. This is Rhapsody, a musical adventure after all, and very few things can be more romantic than an indulgent, theatrical production. I was actually expecting more, but all it boils down to is a handful of performance numbers taking the place of traditional cutscenes every now and then. I'm not going to say the songwriting is particularly clever, it's very on the nose at points, but it's always enjoyable seeing them, and props to the voice actresses, they sound great.
You are my angel, you are my everything. You mean more than anything. When I see your smile so lovely and bright,
these assets for presentation, the atmosphere, the silly story, these are the reasons to experience Rhapsody, because you're certainly not playing it for the combat. Let's just get into the basics of... Wait. I recognize that grid! Oh no, it's a tactics game! No! Actually, it's not that bad. Befitting of NIS, who's basically the kingpin of niche, silly anime tactics games, Rhapsody plays like they were feeling around for potential ideas. I don't know who planned out the battle system, seeing as there's no clear credit for that position, but seeing as Sohei Niikawa both proposed this game and served as producer and wrote the story, I want to say he's the one who made the decision, just spitballing here. If you're familiar with NIS's fare I've mentioned in this video, you know their trademarks like dozens of unit classes, large combat maps, obscene amounts of grinding. Yeah, Rhapsody doesn't have like any of that. For one, there are random encounters, not dedicated maps. The battlefield is very tiny with no special areas to exploit. Characters in battle gain experience all at once like a normal RPG party, rather than individually like in most tactics games. Also, it's like really easy. I'm talking a total cakewalk, or rather cake attack, since Cornet has multiple screen-wide attacks smacking people with desserts. A gal after my own heart. If I could summon giant flan to rain from the sky, I'd be doing that all day long. I just have to learn how to play the trumpet. The game doesn't tell you, but Cornet's horn ability will power up the puppets in range while adding notes to this little music bar up top. And that's pretty much all you have to do in every battle, since it doesn't take long for your puppets to one-shot enemies. By the end of my playthrough, I had a knight that could deal over 600 damage with a single hit, a dragon that could tornado nearly the entire board away, and spawn. No, I'm not kidding! One of your puppets is just Spawn, and you get him by checking your mailbox at a certain point in the game, because that's just the kind of game this is. Lots of cool stuff you can find that doesn't mean much in terms of actually playing it, because playing it isn't very difficult or engaging. I mean, the character stories and side quests are interesting, like when you need to level up Michael and Caroline to level 30 for them to reincarnate. I went back to the Karo Kingdom and actually found Michael, but the castle was weirdly empty. Apparently, the castle's inhabitants were killed by a strange illness caused by the death of the centaur. Hey, wait, didn't I do that? Well, guess that's more blood on my hands. See what I mean when I say actually playing this game for combat isn't interesting, but experiencing the world is? I'm responsible for a small frog mass murder. I'm a French restaurant during lunch rush. That's way more interesting than move here, play horn, stab to death. Perhaps that low difficulty was due to this being intended for younger children or beginners, kind of like Guardian's Crusade that I covered 3 years ago. In that sense, it isn't terrible, but it is fluffy. Through her battles, Cornet eventually gathers all 5 magic stones she needs to travel to Marjolie's castle. Clearing up a few more side quests to help her puppet friends, she visits Cape Hope to warp her to the prince's kidnapper. Prince Napper? A bit of climbing later, Cornet confronts the witches, who are totally outclassed by your limited edition action figures throwing magic stars from orbit. Marjolie even defeats herself when trying to cast a spell. That's how goofy this story is. We're at the end and the villain is defeating themselves. But they aren't the final challenge, as the evil, fraudulent Minister Galonzo pops out from the back to reveal he's revived the ancient weapon that was powerful enough to end the Minstrel War. The same kind of weapon Cornet saw kill her mother when she was a child. The very weapon she's now killing in like a couple minutes. I didn't realize I was collecting small soldiers here. This is ridiculous. Capping it all off with a kiss of true love, she saves Ferdinand from his petrification. But again, presenting a surprising amount of emotional maturity, Cornet questions if everything she's done means she isn't deserving of the prince's love, or even happiness. She's helped plenty of people, but her actions in doing so have also hurt, and in some cases killed. But she's also displayed compassion and courage beyond what most would be capable of. Still, it's always the negatives that stick in one's mind more. So Ferdinand, being the total dreamboat he is, walks up and tells her to follow her heart. If she leaves, he'd be all alone without the one person to see him for himself. Everyone has actions they regret, but all we can do is move forward and try to make things better, even if it means personal sacrifice. Just like how Cornet's mother kept watching over her through Kuduru, making sure her daughter found true happiness before passing on. Rhapsody is a fascinating game. It looks adorable, but tackles concepts of pain and regret. It has goofy humor, but your actions cause the death of others. It's a game of contrast within the scope of itself and the genre as a whole. It's little wonder why it didn't gain traction outside Japan, being so eclectic and quite frankly confusing at times. We didn't even get the 2 mainline sequels until much later when NIS started bundling some of their old games, and I have to say I'm very intrigued by what both of these have to offer. Because Rhapsody was a very charming experience, and even today is still highly unique. It functions on such a different axis for its time, and today I can't really think of much else like it, and I always enjoy experiencing stuff that lets me say that. Granted, part of that comes from me not really getting who it's for. Taking another moment to remember Guardians Crusade, it was pretty clear they were aiming for a young demographic by simplifying JRPG conventions. Rhapsody feels more like they threw somewhat conventional ideas into a hat, picked things out at random, and then used that for the design document. But hey, I also have no idea who Tulip was for, and it's still very engrossing. It's just part of the charm these sorts of games have. Or maybe they just appeal to people like me specifically. Despite being the first RPG NIS put out, it's full of unique quirks and intriguing concepts, all wrapped up in an adorable art style that belies the weight of its theme. Love, regret, joy, sadness, all vital aspects of what we experience here before passing on. Those emotions we share with others, however briefly, are what shape who we are as people. The puppets can't die, seeing as they're inorganic matter. But maybe that's why they want to be human. They can befriend, but not communicate. They can't confess to their crush, or praise their best friend, or laugh with their family. Humans can, and in an age like the one we're living in, those connections are more important than ever. You might not have to go and save your crush from evil witches, or trek across the land in search of magic stones, or visit the past via your possessed fairy pal's dreams, but you can still form those connections. They may cause pain, but the joy they bring is why we're still here, and why we'll keep going. So please, go in love, for love triumphs over all. Play me out, Cornet.